So this morning, I want to address the elephant in the room for a lot of particularly African American devotees and practitioners, and it's the question of traditional gender roles. And I want to start with the question of, can you envision a world wherein there are traditional gender roles that are not synonymous with oppression, hardship, poverty, backwardness, primitivism? Can you imagine that there is such a thing as a society that practices traditional gender roles, and that society is not something out of a nightmare, not something out of the Stone Ages? Because my impression is that there are some of us who cannot do that. There are some of us for whom, as soon as you say traditional gender roles, that is synonymous with everything negative. And before I go into the lesson, I want to, pan out a little bit and just challenge the thinking overall, because I also find that there are people for whom the word religion is just synonymous with primitivism or state control and exploitation, manipulation, deception. And I want you to just consider, is there any way that you can imagine religion as not an arm of oppression? And we could go on and just consider lots of, I call them buzzwords at this point, that people throw out without really examining what they're saying. Because, for example, in 99% of the cases, you don't really know very much about religion. And what I mean by that is, there are almost 5,000 religions on the earth today. Almost 5,000 religions. Before you can make blanket statements that religion is always oppressive, you got to at least know about 10 of the religions, and you don't. Really, you would have to know about, 500 of the religions, and you don't. You can't even name 500 religions. So it isn't fair or realistic to conclude that you can, determine that religion is synonymous with oppression when you've only been exposed to a particular strand of Christianity. And you probably don't know Christianity that well either. So what you can say is, my experience with Christianity has been X, Y, Z. As a result of my experience with Christianity, I feel 1, 2, 3. That is real. Once you start getting beyond that, without having done your homework, it becomes fanciful. You lose credibility to anybody who's thinking. And so similarly, when it comes to traditional gender roles, we like to throw a word out like patriarchy. That's the favorite word that people like to say. If you say patriarchy, then everybody is supposed to just stop in their tracks and say, no, patriarchy is bad. But you don't really know enough about patriarchy to conclude that's what it is. Why do I say that? Because in order for you to know what patriarchy is, you have to look at patriarchy in Ireland, patriarchy in Kuwait, patriarchy in the Amazon, patriarchy in South Africa, patriarchy in Russia, patriarchy in Singapore. You'd have to go all over the world and explore the cultures of the world that practice patriarchy. And you'd have to actually see how it's played out and how it affects men, how it affects women, how it affects children, how it affects the elderly, how it affects the environment, the economy, politics. You got to do your homework. And, that's a study. Most people aren't really in a position to do that kind of study. So again, the best thing that you can say is that this is my experience, and because of my experience, this is what I feel, this is what I'm going to do. Now, I'm not just saying this as a matter of opinion. I'm saying this from a professional perspective as well. From when you work professionally as a counselor, one of the first lessons that you learn is that you cannot know your client. If you deceive yourself into thinking that you know your client, then you're going to do him or her a total disservice. Because your client is going to come to you in their hour of need, and when they have their need, they think that if you can tell them what to do, then their problem will be solved. But if you fall into the habit of telling your client what to do, you're only exacerbating their problem. The only thing that you can do is reflect back to that client how they're perceiving that problem. The only thing you can do is help that client to explore within his or her environment. What are your resources? What are some other ways that you can look at this problem? What are some other approaches? What have you tried so far? You help the client to discover himself, to discover herself. Then you're doing your job. Now you're helping the person. Because little by little, they're going to start to cultivate that muscle. They're going to start conditioned to go through those exercises on their own and troubleshoot their problems, and then start coming to viable solutions. And they get better and better. And they may have to come back to you to level up, but they're going to get better at figuring out what their problem is, defining it properly, and identifying resources within their environment to solve that problem. So, in the same way that I, as a counselor, even if I have had 10,000 clients, I can't assume that I know them. Likewise, even more, I can't assume that I know everything there is to know about all the people in the world, or all the cultures in the world, and all the traditions in the world. All right? In addition, it's important for me to know myself as the service provider, because I need to know where my limitations are. I need to know that I am not in a position to help someone who, for example, is a drug addict. I need to know that. I need to say, hey, you know what? I can't help you. There's nothing I can do for you. I know you need help, but let me refer you to someone else because, maybe, my brother is a drug addict, and I haven't processed that. I'm still dealing with the fact that he was a promising athlete, or a really tremendous scholar, and now he's wasting away as a drug addict. And so I'm not in a position to be objective and help you. Right? So I need to know my limitations as a service provider. Likewise, I need to be respectful of my limits of broader societal issues and say, I don't know enough about that. I'm not in a position to advise you on that. I'm not in a position to speak on that. I don't know it well enough. But I know myself well enough to say that. But I'm always, always, always equipped to be able to reflect and introspect and say, this is what I observe. And based on what I observe, this is how I feel about it. And based on how I feel about it, this is what I would like to happen, or this is what I would like to not happen. That's fair, that's realistic, and is honest. Okay? And so I think that when it comes to things like traditional gender roles, we as Americans are not in the position to observe the Nigerians from a distance, come to our own conclusions about their value system, their economic system, their family structures, and then condemn them and start, labeling them as one thing or another. It's not appropriate. It's very, very disrespectful and offensive to the people who, quite honestly, are extending themselves to us to share the culture and the tradition and participate with us. They're showing us hospitality, which is the only reason why you have, insight into their gender relations anyway. And so I wanna urge my people to be honest about what you know and what you don't know. Speak to your lived experience. Speak to how you feel. Be honest and own what you think and how you feel about how you have seen Nigerian culture in action. Don't be trying to assign meaning to what they do according to your value system. And so, that's where I want to leave it so that we can just continue the conversation, because I know that it is, like I said, the elephant in the room, and it's something that merits mature and level-headed conversations so that we're able to get closer to one another as we hash out the differences in our experiences and opinion. And as always, this is a message that I'm sending out to the leaders, all the folks who really are committed to improving the world through positive influence. I want you to consider the ways in which Oloye Obafemi Origunwa and the Orisha Lifestyle Academy can help you live the medicine that will heal your life and heal the lives of those who you are destined to serve. Visit me at obafemio.com or orishalifestyle.com, and let's start working together to help bring about the good condition. Bye for now. Odabo.